All right, let's get ready to find some inverses of rationals. Even though the rationals are your steroided up fractions, we can still find their inverses. So with our first one, we have f of x is equal to 5 all over x minus 8. And then, of course, we're going to need to find domain and range of both functions, so the inverse and the original. When you're finding the inverse, step 1 says you replace f of x with y. So we're going to have y is equal to 5 all over x minus 8. Step 2 says that you need to switch x and y. So instead of y equals, we're going to have x equals 5 all over y minus 8 instead of x minus 8. Third step says we need to solve for y. So what we're going to do is trying to get that y out of the bottom. To do that, since it's in the bottom or dividing, we're going to multiply both sides of our equation by that denominator. In doing so, we have x times that y minus 8. And that's going to be equal to 5, because on the right-hand side, the y minus 8s will cancel each other out. Okay, from here, we are going to distribute our x, and we get xy minus 8x is equal to 5. Remember that we are solving for y. We need to get y by itself. So the first thing we can do is get rid of that 8x. We're going to add 8x to both sides of our equation. We cannot combine the 5 and the 8x. They are going to stay separate. So we're going to have xy is equal to 5 plus 8x. You could also do 8x plus 5. It's the same. And then our last step, we need to get the y by itself. So we're going to divide both sides by x. Left-hand side, the x's are going to cancel. We get y is equal to 5 plus 8x all over x. And remember, I said that 5 plus 8x is the same thing as 8x plus 5. So you could have it flip-flopped and in proper descending order if you'd like. And then our very last step for finding our inverses, you have to remember to actually write the inverse notation. Our function was f of x, so we're going to have f inverse of x is equal to 5 plus 8x all over x. We still need to find domain and range of everything. So the original and the inverse. I like to put my domain and range in nice little chart. So I'm going to start with domain being one row, my range being another, and then with my columns, I'm going to have f of x, which is my original, and then I'll have the inverse, f inverse of x. Okay. Let's start by finding the domain of f of x. We have a rational function, which is your fraction on steroids. Remember, to find the domain of a rational function, we're going to take the denominator, set it equal to 0, and solve. So we take x minus 8 all over 0, or equal to 0, and we find out that x equals 8 is our restricted value. Remember that our restricted value is the number we cannot be. So if we were to plug 8 into the denominator of f of x, our original function, we would wind up getting an error, an undefined. If you're looking at our number chart or our number line, we have negative infinity on the left, positive infinity on the right, and we can't be 8. So starting out, our very first interval takes us from negative infinity to 8, parentheses around everything, comma in between. We need to jump over the crack in the sidewalk. So we're going to use a jump rope, a union. And then our second part, we have 8 to infinity. And again, with parentheses, because we never actually hit infinity. And we can't include 8 because that's where we wind up with a black hole, that 0 in the denominator. So we just found that the domain of our original function is negative infinity to 8, union 8 to infinity. And because we found the domain of the original, we found the range of the inverse. So the range of f inverse of x is negative infinity to 8, union 8 to infinity. Let's find the domain of the inverse. So if we're looking for the domain of the inverse, remember our inverse function, we wound up with 5 plus 8x all over x. Again, we have a rational function. We're going to take our denominator, what's in the bottom, set it equal to 0. There's no solving work for us to do because x is already by itself. So x equal to 0 is our restricted value. We cannot be 0 because we would get 0 in the denominator, which is just not okay. So if we are looking at the number line to get our answer in interval notation, negative infinity on the left, positive infinity on the right, 0 we cannot be. To find our interval notation, our first piece is going to be negative infinity on up to 0 with parentheses everywhere. We need to jump over the 0, the crack in the sidewalk, which means we need that jump rope. And then we have 0 on up to infinity. We just found the domain of the inverse. We said it was negative infinity on up to 0, union 0 on up to infinity. And because we found the domain of the inverse, we found the range of the original. So the range of f of x is going to be negative infinity to 0, union with 0 on up to infinity.